Coming up on this episode of the Hockey Nuts, Steve and I get you caught up with all the news of the past 2 weeks around the hockey world. We've reached the quarter season mark and the unofficial Thanksgiving milestone point in the season. We'll tell you where every team stands at this important measuring point of the year. We'll have the details of all of this, plus the Minor League Hockey Minute, the NCAA Hockey Minute, and our picks of the week coming up next. This is the Hockey Nuts Podcast, Season 2, Episode 15, recorded on Thursday, November 30th, 2017. Thanksgiving break season review.
Shut up and sit down.
Reeves dropped it on back, and it's Letang giving it on across. Dumoulin a shot, and it went wide to the long side. And then Letang dropped one, then kicked back onto Nash. Long toss ahead. Pasternak in alone. Score!
Rask holding on to it. Lots of time left on this power play. Little drop pass finding Noah Hannafin. Little dish for Rask. Across off Yarncroke. Derek Ryan collects it. He'll take it back. He'll dart. Ryan a shot blocked. Fought off by Saros. They score! Justin Williams got to it at the side of the goal. Nashville complaining about it. Carolina, we believe, has a power play goal from him, and they have a 3-2 lead.
Green with a puck. Circling. Turning. Shot blocked by JT Miller. Miller tied up by Tatar. Zuccarello. Nice little pass. Brady Shea comes out. Shea moves in. Spins. Holds. Trying to get a pass through. Zuccarello. He scores! Rangers win! Oh, baby, what a goal! What a win for the Rangers!
Backstrom and Bozak saw each other off. Orlov comes in and gets the puck for Washington. Off the boards. And good work by Oshie to get the puck out again. Ovechkin with an empty net. Takes a shot at it. And a good save there by Mitch Marner. Backstrom. Round for Ovechkin, who wants to get his third. Oshie. Ovechkin scores! A hat trick for Alex Ovechkin and Alex Louis. Boy, great emotion on both sides.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Hockey Nuts Podcast. My name's Wayne Halley. I'm here with Steve Ball. How's it going tonight, Steve?
I'm doing good, Wayne. How are you doing this evening?
You doing very well. A little tired because we're still in the middle of home improvement projects.
Yeah.
And you know, of course, work. It's the holidays, and yeah, if you're watching us on YouTube, if you look behind me, you can see all kinds of crap behind me. That's because half of my living room is sitting in my office behind me. So yeah, we're redoing our living room, so we've got a mess at my house right now, but hey, we're getting through it, and I think by this weekend, or certainly by the time we record next week, the living room should be back in shape and back in business. So and then
God bless you, man. I know it's a lot of hard work there with your flooring and stuff, but hang in there, and sounds like it's a good project that's coming through pretty good there.
Yeah, when it's all said and done, it's going to be something. It's been something we've been wanting to do, and we just finally got around to doing it. So yeah, we're about partway through. We're about halfway through the project now, so it should be getting done here shortly. So. But in the meantime, we've had our Thanksgiving holiday weekend, which basically caused us to not do an episode last week because you and I both had a busy week last week, both due to work and personal. So we decided to skip a week for the podcast for the week because we just had too much going on. So that means we are sitting at episode 15 for the year, and we've got 2 weeks worth of stuff to get into.
We have a lot of stuff to go to review and regurgitate.
Yep. So let's get started without any further delay. There's normally we throw in our plugs and all this stuff, but we're going to skip all that this week just so we can get right to the news because there's been a lot going on. And let's get to it. And first things first, we've got to recap how our three favorite teams have done over the past couple of weeks. And which, of course, to remind everybody, that's the Boston Bruins, the Carolina Hurricanes, and the New York Rangers. And since it appears to me, anyway, that the Rangers had the lightest schedule of the three, we'll go ahead and start with them.
That's fine. Podcast night 2 weeks ago, actually the very next night, we played the Columbus Blue Jackets on the 17th.
Yep.
And Sergei Bobrovsky was just phenomenal.
I watched part of that game, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
He played really well.
Played an incredible game and shut us out. The Columbus Blue Jackets won that game 2-0, and that was in Columbus, and that's the last time we play there this year. So we'll see what happens. We got them at the Garden again one more time, but we were really never in that game due to Bobrovsky. Then we jump ahead 2 nights. We played on the 19th against Ottawa, and Henrik Lundqvist pulled off a shutout in that game. So we kind of made amends for the loss to Columbus, and also got some bragging rights back from the playoff loss that we had last year, 4-2 to Ottawa. But that was a very good game, and you and I guess, will talk about Ottawa. They're on a slide right recently, not playing well at all. But that was a big win for us, 3-0. Then against Carolina, another match that really wasn't a game. I watched that in the first 3 minutes. We were up 2-0, and really never looked back. We beat the Carolina Hurricanes on the 22nd. The day before Thanksgiving, 6-1 at PNC Arena. Then came 2 overtime games. We beat the Detroit Red Wings 2-1 in overtime. Game winner in that game by JT Miller. And we won 4-3 in a shootout against Vancouver on the 26th. Both those games were in the Garden. And finally, to close it out, we lost on Tuesday night of this week, 2 nights ago, to the Florida Panthers 5-4 in a game that they scored in the last minute and 9 seconds. Otherwise, the game was tied, and I really thought we were going to get a point out of that game, but it didn't work out. So all in all, I 4-2 for those 6 games. Particularly the way we were playing, I'm pretty pleased with it. The Rangers right now are playing very well, and a couple injuries, but I think things are going to work out, at least for Ryan McDonagh to get back in the lineup here probably tomorrow night. But Mika Zibanejad is the other injury.
Yeah, Zibanejad just went down, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the podcast. Looks like he'll be down for a couple of weeks, and yeah, it's kind of an up and down couple of weeks there for the Rangers. Not too terrible though, but they're staying afloat at least in terms of playoff seeding. But let's talk about that Carolina game a little bit, because I'll go ahead and start talking about the Carolina Hurricanes last couple of weeks here. We might as well start with that game, and I didn't get to watch that whole game, but I did watch bits and pieces of it. And, you're right. Carolina just didn't even show up that night.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure every time I saw the score change and the score updated, I'm like, Steve must be kicking himself for not going to that game.
Yeah.
I said,
Let me tell you something.
You would have been having a ball.
I've been going to those games for a long time, Wayne, and we have never, ever been up like that. Never. It has never gone like that. We go to those games, and usually it's 1 or 2 goals. Now, last few years we've won against Carolina. We've held our own. But I can remember when Carolina used to beat us both games.
Yeah.
So that but it's never 6-1 or even 4-1. Normally it's a tight game.
Yep.
So that was really surprising.
Yep. Well, and speaking of Carolina, on top of that game, if you go all the way back to the 16th, that was the game, or the last game that we didn't cover. They lost 6-4 to the Islanders back then, and then they won 3-1 at Buffalo on the 18th, and they beat 4-2 in a very good effort against the Islanders on the 19th. And then, of course, on the 22nd was the 6-1 loss to the Rangers. So they played extremely well against the Islanders, who at the time were as good as any team in the league, really, in terms of how well they were playing.
Right.
And then they went and laid that egg against the Rangers 3 nights later. And then after that, 2 nights after that, on the 24th, they lost 5-4 against Toronto. And then on the 26th, they won in a shootout against Nashville. And then on the 28th, they lost in a shootout against Columbus. So Carolina's had an up and down week, and I think the overwhelming theme with Carolina at this point, at least in the terms of the last couple of weeks, is their goaltending play has been very inconsistent for them.
Right.
And I think, obviously the coaching staff and the brass with the Carolina Hurricanes want Scott Darling to be their undisputed number one starter. But he has had some struggles over the past couple of weeks, and particularly with his glove hand, I've noticed. He let in one goal where it was just a fluttering duck that was just kind of lobbed in on him. And he went to just catch it out of the air at about eye level, and he just completely whiffed it, and it went,
right in the back of the net.
Right into the net.
Yeah.
I can't even remember who that was against. I think it was in the.
It was Mika Zibanejad.
That's right. It was in the Ranger game. Yeah.
Yep. Mika Zibanejad scored. We scored a goal at the beginning, and Zibanejad scored the second goal, and it couldn't have been.
It was the second goal. Yeah. Yeah. It was the second goal in the Ranger game. Now that you mention it, and. Ever since then, he's been fighting the puck.
Right.
Like everything's an adventure. Shot goes on net. It just looks like he's fighting the puck. If you've watched a lot of hockey and you watch goaltenders play, a goaltender when he's on top of his game is not only making the saves, but he's controlling the rebound. The puck either hits him and drops straight down where he can cover it, or he's directing it away from the net into the corners, into the sideboards. In the last couple of weeks, Scott Darling has just been, everything's been a fight. He's been making the saves. Sometimes he hasn't been making the saves, but sometimes he's been making the saves and the rebound's gone right to the opposing team. And that's something that a goaltender at that level shouldn't be doing. So, and in the meantime, they've been giving Cam Ward some starts, and he's been, okay on some nights, and he's had a couple of bad nights. So overall, it's the goaltending is struggling a bit for Carolina, and overall team defense. I mean, they've let in the last 2 weeks, 6 goals. They had the 1 goal against Buffalo, but 2 goals against the Islanders, 6 goals against the Rangers, 5 goals against Toronto, 3 goals against Nashville, 3 goals against Columbus. So they're struggling defensively overall, team wise, and a team that is struggling to come up with offense as Carolina has. It's just not a good situation, but they seem to be hanging in there. They're not totally out of it at this point. They're still well within range of being able to make the playoffs and well ahead of where they have been the last couple of years. So it's not all doom and gloom there in Carolina, but there's some concern there, and there's some things that they need to shore up if they want to make a serious playoff run. So, but just kind of overall an up and down week for Carolina. So we'll have to look and see if they can turn things around with that one. All right, now that leaves us with the Boston Bruins, and they have had a fantastic couple of weeks, especially given the fact that how many injuries they've been dealing with.
Yes.
Because it seems like every single game the Bruins have played, they're losing a guy. They're getting a guy back and then immediately losing another one in during the game. It just seems to be, like, for example, last night they got Backus and they got Marchand back. But then they lost a couple of more players. Krejci was out, and Jake DeBrusk, Louis DeBrusk kid. I was almost said Louis DeBrusk. Jake DeBrusk went down as well with injury. So they seem to be gaining 2 steps forward, 2 steps back kind of thing on the injury front. Yeah. But with all that said, and the thing with Boston, too, is Tuukka Rask has been struggling in net, but Anton Khudobin has been playing phenomenally well.
Very well.
Yeah, I mean, he's still undefeated on this season. I think he's 7-0-2 now.
Oh, yes.
The backup goalie for the Bruins. So
I thoroughly enjoyed your win against Pittsburgh, too, by the way.
Yeah. So, let's look at the games. 2-1 win at L.A. back on the 16th. That was, I watched that game that night because I got home late after work, so I was able to stay up and watch that. And that was a great game. on all fronts on that. And then they turn around 2 nights later, go up to San Jose and beat them 3-1 on the 18th. So I was right away very happy with that, because that West Coast road swing, that Anaheim, LA, San Jose, Boston's always struggled with that. And they managed to get 4 out of 6 points out in those 3 games. So they did lose to Anaheim prior, but they got wins against LA and San Jose, and their regulation wins too, which is even better. And then they came back east, and still on the road, they got a shootout win against New Jersey on the 22nd. And that was a fun one to watch. That went 11, 12 rounds, the shootout.
Right.
So that was a very fun game to watch, or particularly the shootout. I was on the edge of my seat, and I was supposed to pick up my son at work at about 15 minutes prior. And I told him, I said, you got to hang tight. I got to watch this shootout. I ended up picking him up like 15 minutes late because of it. So, and then on the 24th, the Pittsburgh game that you mentioned, the Bruins got a 4-3 win on that one, which I was very happy with.
Yeah. My wife and I watched that, and we were extremely happy with that.
Yeah, any win, even though there was a lot of controversy around that Sidney Crosby goal, the one that he basically whacked it off of Hudobin's chest into the net after slashing him in the head, interfering with the goalie. And the league said no goalie interference. And, of course, the whistle had blown before it went in the net. And they still allowed the goal. And the big controversy was, and everybody was saying it, even fans that weren't fans of the Bruins were saying, well, it's Crosby. They're going to allow it. So
yeah,
there's special rules with Crosby. That was the overwhelming sentiment with that one. So, but
I'm not going to say anything there. I will say that Crosby and Malkin have not started out like Crosby and Malkin normally do.
No.
And if it wasn't for Phil Kessel, Pittsburgh wouldn't even be sniffing a playoff position right now.
Yeah, he's been making up a lot for what they're not doing. Yeah.
He's playing tremendous. Phil Kessel has kept them where they are right now. If it wasn't for him, forget it.
Yep.
Pittsburgh wouldn't even they'd be down there with Buffalo.
But yeah, so Crosby gets the gift in that game, and but Boston gets the win ultimately, and it's a regulation win at that, so it's even better. Pittsburgh gets 0 points, exactly what they deserved in that game. 4-2. Then on the 26th, Boston has Edmonton in, and of course Edmonton's been struggling this year, but they managed to pull out a win against the Bruins. There was a 4-2 loss against Edmonton, and that was regulation. That was very disappointing that night. And then finally, to end up the week, they played Tampa Bay on the 29th, and they got the 3-2 win against Tampa Bay. So, when I saw Tampa Bay on the schedule, I'm like, oh, crap, here's a loss. But they surprised everybody, and they came out with the win, a regulation win at that. Even though they almost gave it away because they had a 3-0 lead at one point, and they allowed Tampa Bay back into the game. But Tampa Bay threw everything they had them, and they just couldn't get the tying goal there at the end. So the Bruins escaped that one with the win. So that puts Boston at 5-1 on the week. So I'll take that anytime.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. The two wins on the West Coast road trip is big enough.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
But that's an excellent week with wins against New Jersey and Pittsburgh and Tampa Bay. Three of the top teams there.
We'll take those points to the bank and go from there. So, all right. So where we haven't looked at things for the past couple of weeks, why don't we take a look at the standings?
All right.
And talk about a few of the teams that any observations you've made over the past couple of weeks about any of these teams. Feel free to interrupt me. But let's start in the East.
Okay.
Metropolitan Division, your top 3 right now is Columbus, Islanders, and New Jersey. Columbus with 33 points, Islanders at 32, New Jersey with 32.
Right.
In the Atlantic Division, you've got your top team is still Tampa Bay with 36 points. Toronto's at 33. Boston's at 26, but they have 3 games in hand against Toronto and 2 games in hand against Tampa Bay.
Right.
Your 2 wild cards right now are Washington with 29 points, Pittsburgh with 29 points. And then leading out the rest of the pack, you've got the Rangers sitting on the outside looking in at 28. Carolina at 25. Again, they've played 2 games less than just about everybody else in the conference. Detroit at 25 points. Montreal is climbing the standings. They're now at 25. Philadelphia at 23. Ottawa at 22. Florida at 22. Buffalo at 16. Now, taking a look at the Eastern standings, they always talk about Thanksgiving as being a measuring stick on where, you expect teams to be at the end of the year. And it is just over the quarter pole anyway of the season. A little bit over a quarter of the way there. We're almost at a third of the way there at this point. What do you think?
I would say it's really almost a third of the season when you get to 27 games.
Yeah.
I'm sticking by my guns on this. I think the Islanders and New Jersey are gonna fade. I don't think they're gonna keep playing the way they're playing right now. I just don't. I just think that I've watched those teams play, and they're not. Neither one of those. I think the Islanders are the better team. Okay, I'll say that, and they may make the playoffs. But the Devils, when they beat us, they had to come from behind. They rely, as I said previously, on Corey Schneider. They basically think, we've got the best goalie maybe in the NHL back there, so we're just going to let him stand on his head. And he has to keep them in games.
Yep.
But you'll notice that their goal differential is not very big.
It's only +4. Yep.
And so they're winning games very close. They're playing well, and I'm surprised. Believe me, I did not pick New Jersey to be playing this well.
They have a road record that's rather impressive. 8-2-2 right now.
Yep. Good point.
Which is impressive, but they are showing signs. They're 5-2-3 in their last 10. So if you take that into account, they're essentially 5-5. Sometimes I like to look at those overtime losses as actual losses.
Right.
So if you look at that, even though they're still getting a point out of those three overtime losses, it's still they're 5-5 in the last 10.
Right.
Now the Islanders are still playing well. They've won 4 in a row. They're 7-2-1 in their last 10. They haven't lost in regulation at home yet, which is amazing considering how crappy of a building they're playing in.
Listen, of those two teams, the Islanders are definitely the better team, and could they make the playoffs? Certainly, both those teams could make the playoffs, but I'd be really surprised if New Jersey makes the playoffs. I really would. I don't think, if you look at their roster, and they're playing very, very well for what they have.
Yep.
And I just think you're going to see them start to fade, and maybe in the second third of the season, and you may see the Islanders fade as well. Other than that, I think every team is living up to expectations. They may not be where we picked them to be in the standings as far as their playoff ranking. No, I would have never picked Pittsburgh to be the worst wild card team, for example.
Yeah.
In the Eastern Conference, but they're still in the playoffs, and I look at the Rangers as being 1 point out of the playoffs. It's neither here nor there at this point. They're playing. They've dug themselves out of that hole they were in, and they're right back in the thick of it.
They're 1 point out, but they have a game in hand on the team that's just ahead of them. So you win that game, and now they're 1 point up.
Right.
Now, looking at the standings, though, it continues to be a logjam, particularly in the Metropolitan Division. I mean, you've got the Metropolitans holding both wildcard spots right now, and then the very first spot outside the playoffs is the Rangers right there. So you're essentially looking at a 6-team race fighting, or 6 teams right now, right in the thick of things in the Metro, and not far behind them is Carolina. So Carolina wins their games in hand. They're right in there too.
Right.
And the Atlantic Division is definitely looking the weaker one, because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The bottom 6 in the entire Eastern Conference right now, 5 of them are Atlantic Division teams.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, and the thing you say about the wild cards too, I see a lot of chinks in the armor at Pittsburgh. Anyway, yeah, they're sitting in that last wild card spot, but they're at a -16 with their plus-minus. They just lost their goaltender, Matt Murray.
Yes,
he's going to be out for a while, so that's going to cause a problem. Pittsburgh's not a very good team on the road. They're 5-8-2, and they're 5-4-1 in their last 10, although they have won their last 2 games since the loss at Boston. So yeah, Pittsburgh's one of those teams that just seems to be win one, lose one kind of they're in that
Right.
kind of mode right now. So they need to break out of that funk if they want to continue to stay in that hunt. And I'm sure they will. Like I said, Murray's been hurt. Malkin's been hurt. Crosby hasn't been up to his normal standards. So those guys will get things straightened out. And once they do, Pittsburgh will be a tough team once again. But I think the last time we recorded, Washington was on the outside looking in, and they've quietly gotten back into the playoff picture.
Yep.
They're now sitting in that first wild card spot. They're a -1 in their differential, and they've won 3 in a row. So, Washington's showing that they're still a good team, even though we both think that they've taken a step back from last year.
Yes.
And the other one thing I wanted to note in the East before we head out west was 2 weeks ago when we last recorded, Tampa Bay was like head and shoulders above everybody else. It was Tampa Bay, and then there was everybody else.
Right.
They've come back to the pack a little bit. They're 6-4 in their last 10, and they've essentially allowed other teams back in. Yeah, they still hold a 3-point lead on everybody else, but they're showing signs they're not as unbeatable as they were earlier in the season.
Right.
So that's encouraging for everybody else in that conference.
That is.
Which is why I'm still thrilled that Boston was able to pull out a win against them.
Oh, absolutely. I know how that feels. We beat them as well. So
yep. It's only their 6 losses on the year. Boston has one of them, so that's a good thing.
Yep.
All right, let's move out. Oh, before we go, I wanted to mention Montreal, too. They were, 2 weeks ago, they were pretty much at the bottom of the standings.
Yeah.
And look, they're making a hard charge. They've won 3 in a row. They're still a -20 in the differential, but the big factor with Montreal is they've got Carey Price back. And they played the other night. And he played very well the other night. So Montreal fans should be very, very happy that they're back. And they're not completely out of it. They're still only 4 points out of a playoff spot. So that's easily recoverable if they keep things on track.
That's right. That's right, Wayne.
And then Buffalo, they've really fallen off the map.
Yeah,
1-7
as far as Buffalo goes, getting rid of Dan Bilesma, and he wasn't in there but 1.5 years, and they shoot themselves. I thought they shot themselves in the foot when they did that. But I don't think that Jack Eichel liked them, and I really think that's what it came down to. So I don't think he liked playing for Dan Bilesma, so they got rid of him. And now here they are going through a new coach and a new system and everything. So they're a team in transition again.
Eichel's not exactly lighting up the scoreboard with the new coach either. He's got 19 points in 25 games. For his guy that came in with as much hype as he had, that's probably not good enough. But yeah, Buffalo has really, really fallen back. They're now 6 points behind Florida, the next spot up, in dead last. And they're -30 on their differential already. 1-7-2 in their last 10. So, yeah, if I were a Buffalo fan, I would be pretty disappointed. And there's a lot of rumors flying around that there are players available on that Buffalo team already. They're being shopped around. Evander Kane's one of the big names coming out as a possible of being moved out of Buffalo.
Right.
So, all right, let's look out west. In the Central Division, you have St. Louis with 35 points, Winnipeg with 34, and Nashville with 33 in a logjam at the top of the Central Division. In the Pacific Division, you have Vegas at 31, still in first place, Los Angeles with 31, and San Jose at 28. Right now, your 2 wild card is Dallas with 27, Chicago with 27, but right behind them on the outside looking in is Calgary, who also has 27. Colorado at 26, Vancouver at 26, Anaheim with 26, Minnesota at 25, Edmonton with 22, and Arizona at 16. And first thing I see there, there's a lot to get into here, is Arizona's starting to catch back up.
Yeah, they are. They're coming on a little bit here with little wins here and there, and picking up a point and all that kind of stuff.
Yep. The dismal start that they started off, but in the last 10, they're 4-4-2.
Yep.
And they're back to within 6 points of the next team above them, which they weren't even close to that before.
Right.
And the next team above them is Edmonton, who's had their own struggles so far this year. There's a lot of rumors coming out of Edmonton right now of players that might be on the move. I know Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is a name I've seen come out. I've seen, there's been a few names out of Edmonton. Goaltending may be shaken up there a little bit, but although now that Cam Talbot's hurt, they really can't do anything with that because you can't trade a guy when he's hurt. So at least I don't believe they're allowed to. But they're Peter Chiarelli over there in Edmonton is on the hot seat right now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes, he is.
Because
Edmonton I'm surprised at Edmonton's start. I really did not expect it. And it's one of those things where they have to get it going soon.
Yep.
They cannot continue to flounder where they are right now. They have to get it going soon.
Yeah, they're 5 points out of a playoff spot right now, and the team that's in that last wild card spot has a game in hand on them, so they could easily be 7 if they win that game in hand. 7 points out of a playoff spot.
Right.
Edmonton's sitting at a -14 now. Now, if you're an Edmonton fan, Edmonton is not out of the playoff hunt, but, man, they better get things going.
Right.
And they've shown signs. They've won 2 in a row, but it seems like when they put together a 2 or 3 game winning streak, they turn around and lose 3 in a row.
And they lose bad, too.
Yeah.
So, I'm really I'm kind of perplexed there as to why things are going the way they're going there. Of course, their goaltending hasn't been really good. Cam Talbot has not played like he did last year, so
right,
that's part of it.
Yep.
But
another team that's been struggling a lot this year is Anaheim, and we kind of know why Anaheim's been struggling. They're suffering a lot of injuries. To key players,
right?
And that's been their major issue this year. Not so much their play, but just how unhealthy they've been. But we have a couple of other teams, Colorado, Vancouver, who were sitting in playoff spots when we last recorded, and we said, I think even then, that those two teams will probably fall out of the hunt. And here we are 2 weeks later,
and they fell out of the hunt.
They've fallen out of the hunt. Vancouver's 3-5-2 in their last 10. Colorado is 4-4-2 in their last 10, and both are now sitting on the outside looking in of the playoff picture. And, of course, Colorado traded away Matt Duchene, but that was a move more for the future rather than to fix anything for the present. So
that's right.
So, yeah.
The shocker is the Winnipeg Jets. The Winnipeg Jets are playing like a fine-tuned machine.
Yeah, they are.
Watch them play. They are stunning to watch, and they're hitting on all cylinders. They're even getting great goaltending.
Yep.
So watch out, man. We said beginning of the year, just give them a little confidence. They're the Columbus Blue Jackets of the Western Conference.
And if things fall right for them, things can happen. Yep.
Yeah.
We said the same thing about LA, and they've also been, they started out crazy, but they're falling back in the last couple of weeks. The Kings are only 3-6-1 in their last 10, but they have won their last 2. But Los Angeles is showing signs of sputtering here a little bit, but the start that they had still has them strongly in a playoff spot.
Yep.
But yeah, the surprises so far to me in terms of the good side, LA and Winnipeg both have played much better than we expected. And of course, Vegas, what more can we say about Vegas? Now, the thing with Vegas that I've noticed is when they're at home, they're practically unbeatable. Now, of course, they are 9-2 at home, so they have lost a couple, but that's where the bulk of their wins are coming from. They're only 6-5-1 on the road, but they're still playing very well.
Yeah.
They're 6-3-1 in their last 10, and they're sitting right there at the top of the division, tied with LA. But they have 2 games in hand on LA, so Vegas is sitting in a good spot. Wouldn't it be something if they made the playoffs first year out?
Oh, I'm telling you. Can you imagine the stuff going on in that city? Make the playoffs. Oh God, transactions at the sports books would blow your mind.
Yep. So, all right. Well, that's our little tidbits anyway for what we saw over the past couple of weeks around the league. And let's get into some of the stories that we actually came up with. And let's get things started with injuries. And first things first, defenseman Braden McNabb signed, transactions I meant to say. I was looking at injuries, but that comes next. Transactions. Defenseman Braden McNabb signed a 4-year, $10 million contract with the Golden Knights on Thursday. The contract runs through the 21-22 NHL season with an average annual value of $2.5 million. 26-year-old could have become an unrestricted free agent on July 1st. McNabb has 2 assists and his +10 leads the Golden Knights with 56 hits and 52 block shots in 20 games. He is one of 6 players in the NHL who have more than 50 hits and 50 block shots so far this season. McNabb has 52 points in 257 NHL games with the Sabres, Kings, and Golden Knights. So, classic stay-at-home guy. A guy that every team needs to have.
Right.
And if I remember right, looking back to the expansion draft, Vegas pretty much picked guys, with a few exceptions. They pretty much picked all the guys that they picked. All are going to have their contracts run up at the end of this season,
right?
Which gives them a lot of flexibility at the end of the year going into next year. But if they want to have a team next year, they got to start signing some of these guys because
that's right.
They could end up with a full team of unrestricted free agents heading out of town.
Yeah.
So. They probably brought all these guys with, last year on their contract, bring them in. That way they get a good, strong look at them. Let the player decide whether he wants to stay in Vegas, and then they're going to be. I think you're going to see signings like this out of Vegas throughout the whole season, where they start to nail down some of these key positions that every team has to have. But it's a guy like McNabb is not going to win you a Stanley Cup. We'll put it that way.
That's right.
But every team needs to have a guy like him.
Absolutely.
A stay-at-home guy, number 4 to 6 defenseman in that ballpark, and they're basically starting that process now. All right, forward Torrey Mitchell was traded to the LA Kings by the Montreal Canadiens on Thursday, and this was last Thursday. No, did this happen last night or last week? I think last week.
Yeah,
on
it was
Thursday,
last week.
For a conditional pick in the 2018 NHL Draft. If the Kings make the playoffs, the Canadiens will receive a 2018 fourth-round pick that they traded to the LA Kings for forward Dwight King in a deal that was finalized back on November 15th. If the Kings do not make the playoffs, Montreal gets LA's 2018 fifth-round pick. Mitchell, who's 32, played in 11 games with the Canadiens this season. He was scoreless with 2 penalty minutes. He has 141 points in 617 NHL games with the Canadiens, Sabres, Wild, and Sharks. The Kings are in second place in the Pacific Division with 26 points. Canadiens are in sixth place in the Atlantic Division with 19 points. So this was a trade to me where I don't know if this was a case where the Kings needed Mitchell or Montreal needed to get rid of Mitchell. I don't know. What was your take on that one?
I read it. To me, the bigger, sweeter part of the deal is whether or not the Kings make the playoffs and what pick the Canadiens will get as a result of that. I think Torrey Mitchell was just somebody they were willing to part ways with, and I didn't see that as a real integral part of what the Canadiens were looking to do in their future. They were willing to let him go.
Yeah.
And now they're looking at a guy that they're going to pick up either 4th or 5th round in the draft based on how the Kings perform.
Yeah.
And so I saw it as something that a guy that believe it or not, and boy, I hope I'm not saying this wrong, but as it looks to me on paper, a guy that the Canadiens were willing to part with. They just didn't need him.
Yeah, and the LA Kings needed a little extra forward, for whatever reason. They felt they needed him. So, anyway. But, no, yeah, this is certainly not a earth-shattering trade. We'll put it that way.
Yep.
It's kind of a depth thing. Not depth to the point where we're talking about minor leaguers, but depth in terms of third and fourth line. All right. Forward Cam Atkinson signed a 7-year, $41.125 million contract with the Columbus Blue Jackets on November 17th. The contract, which will run through the 24-25 NHL season, has an average annual value of $5.875 million. 28-year-old could have become an unrestricted free agent on July 1st. Atkinson has 233 points in 397 games with the Jackets, who selected him in the 6th round of the 2008 NHL Draft. So, obviously a core component for the Blue Jackets, and they wanted to lock him up long term, and they have gone ahead and done so before it even comes to free agency with him.
Yes, he's definitely a building block for their future. So,
yep, I mean, great player to get for a 6th rounder. Sure.
Absolutely, yep. He's if you play the Columbus Blue Jackets, he's in the thick of every game.
Yep. All right, next one. Center Adam Henrique, forward Joseph Blandisi, and a 3rd-round pick in the 2018 NHL Draft were acquired by the Anaheim Ducks in a trade with the Devils on Thursday for defenseman Sammy Vatanen and a conditional 3rd-round pick. Henrique, who's 27, has 14 points in 24 games this season. He's second among Devils forwards in average ice time at 18:15, including 2:54 per game on the penalty kill. Also second among Devils forwards. Vatanen, who's 26, has 4 points and a -6 rating in 15 games this season and was 3rd on the Ducks in average average ice time. He missed the first 7 games of the season, recovering from off-season shoulder surgery. So this was a case where the Ducks needed to add a couple of players to kind of shore up their holes on the team thanks to injuries.
Yes.
And the Devils are a little light on defensemen, so there's definitely a mutual agreement there.
Yeah, the trade of Adam Henrique is a big one to me. He's an integral part of the Devils, was an integral part of the Devils team, and remains to be seen what's going to happen there. Whether or not Sami Vatanen blends in, it probably will, but Adam Henrique is a big part of that Devils team.
Yep.
And they I think he will flourish in Anaheim.
Yeah, Sami Vatanen was hurt to start off the year. If I remember right. He's only played 15 games so far this year. He missed the first handful or so of games due to injury. And obviously, the Ducks felt that they could... Obviously, you're not going to get players for nothing, so they had to give up something. And the Ducks are having more injury issues with their forwards than they are with their defensemen. So this was a case where the Ducks almost had to had their hand forced on them in that they needed to get a couple of more forwards brought into the fold in order to make up. Now, what this does, though, is imagine when all these guys come back that the Ducks are missing.
Yeah.
They're going to be good because you add those players that are injured back, and then you add Henrique into that roster. The Ducks are going to be a scary team if they can get healthy.
I agree with you 100%. And maybe easily one of the top 3 best defensive teams in the NHL.
Yep. Yeah, and they're the Ducks are struggling to stay afloat there because of all these injuries in the playoff race. And if they get some of their guys back, that will you're gonna see the Ducks shoot up the standings once they get their guys back. So all right. Did you have any other transactions you wanted to talk about?
No, sir. We got it covered.
All right. Let's move on to injuries. And there were quite a few. Boys are hurting themselves over the past couple of weeks. Let's start with the Matt Murray situation.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh Penguins goalie Matt Murray is week to week with a lower body injury. Murray was placed on injury reserve on Tuesday after leaving a 5-4 overtime win against the Flyers on Monday, with 4:21 remaining in the second period. He had to be helped off the ice after Flyers forward Jakub Voracek crashed into him following a breakaway. Murray is 11-7-1 with 2.95 goals against average and .906 save percentage in 21 games so far this season. Tristan Jarry, or is it Jarry?
I heard them pronounce it Jarry, Wayne.
Jarry, okay. It just jumped out at me as European. So Tristan Jarry, 22, made 8 saves on 10 shots in relief of Murray. He has stopped 41 of 45 shots in 2 straight wins after beginning his NHL career 0-1-2. Pittsburgh selected Jarry in the second round of the 2013 NHL draft 1 year after they drafted Murray in the third round. Jarry said Murray has provided advice. The Penguins recalled goalie Casey DeSmith from Wilkes-Barre Scranton on Tuesday. He allowed 3 goals on 15 shots in his NHL debut, a 7-1 loss to the Winnipeg Jets on October 29th. After Murray allowed 4 goals on 9 shots and was pulled. DeSmith is 9-2-1 with 2.29 goals against and .924 save percentage in 12 AHL games this season. So we have ourselves a goalie situation or a goalie controversy in Pittsburgh.
In Pittsburgh, 2 guys you wouldn't have thought of. What's your take on the injury to Murray? What did you think?
Oh, where it's week to week.
It looked like it might have been groin. I don't know.
Well, that's what was my initial thought. Either knee or groin. Because, week to week, that means it's going to be a while.
Yeah.
And with goalies, groin injuries take a while to come back from. So that's what I'm guessing as well. But here's where last year they would have been, when Murray got hurt. Because he's kind of been plagued with injuries so far in his career. He's gotten hurt quite a bit.
Yeah.
Which should be concerning if you're a Pittsburgh fan.
Right.
Yeah, he's your number one guy, but as much as he's getting hurt, that's not good news. And the depth isn't there like it was last year. Last year, Murray gets hurt, you just bring in Marc-Andre Fleury and you continue on.
Yep.
This year, you're, Tristan Jarry and Casey DeSmith. How many Pittsburgh fans can honestly say they knew who Tristan Jarry and Casey DeSmith were before this season?
That's Wayne. That's a great point. I really, you'd have to be a very, very knowledgeable guy about the roster and and your team's AHL prospects, et cetera,
It would
to have
definitely
guessed that those two would be on the team right now.
Yep, it would take in a hardcore for sure. So yeah, Pittsburgh's in emergency mode at this point with their goaltending situation. So it'll be interesting to see how they respond as a team. All right. Florida Panthers forward Evgeny Dadonov is expected to miss 4 to 6 weeks with an upper body injury. Dadonov was injured in a 4-1 loss to the Chicago Blackhawks on Saturday when he was hit by defenseman Cody Franson in front of the Chicago net. 9:47 into the third period. Dadonov ranks 4th on the Panthers with 18 points in 22 games, playing mostly with center Alexander Barkov and left wing Jonathan Huberdeau. He replaced Jaromir Jagr on the top line after the Panthers opted not to re-sign Jagr, who signed a $1 million contract with the Flames on October 4th. Dadonov signed a 3-year, $12 million contract on June 30th. He was selected in the third round of the 2007 NHL draft by the Panthers and played 55 games from 2009 to 2012, and then spent the last 4 seasons in the Continental Hockey League. So Dadonov has actually played pretty well this year for them.
He was not in the game the other night, though.
Nope.
Tuesday night.
Nope. So it's like I just misplaced a story there. Had to move it. All right, moving on to the next injury. Dallas Stars defenseman Marc Methot will be out 4 to 6 weeks after he had arthroscopic surgery on his injured knee last Sunday. Methot, who's 32, hasn't played since November 6th against the Winnipeg Jets because of the injury. So pretty straightforward there. Methot is going to be out for a while.
Yes.
And I know that's his, I'm horrible with these names, and I know Marc Methot, the pronunciation is Methot, but every time I see that, the French in me says Mitho. That should be Mitho. That should be his the pronunciation of his name, but no, it's Methot. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. All right. Let's talk about Mika Zibanejad. Rangers center Zibanejad is out indefinitely with a concussion, Coach Alain Vigneault said on Thursday. Zibanejad is going through concussion protocol, and there's no timetable for his return. Vigneault said Zibanejad was injured on a hit by Detroit Red Wings forward Darren Helm during a 2-1 overtime win on Friday. Zibanejad played in a 4-3 shootout win against the Canucks on Sunday and took part in the morning skate and warm-up Tuesday before being scratched for the game against Florida Panthers at Madison Square Garden. Well, this is a case of delayed reaction, huh?
It is, and to be quite honest with you, they said during the game that he was out. I did not know it was concussion until later on. But I'll say this: when they say he's out indefinitely, for this particular injury, it could be a month or it could be a week. You really don't know.
Yeah.
Because it's based on a doctor's prognosis and how you're going through the protocol. So it's frustrating. You won't get direct answers on that particular injury as far as prognosis for return. Hard to report on something like that.
Yep.
The first time I've heard of Mika Zibanejad having concussion problems as well.
Well, if it's his first, that's a good sign. They usually recover pretty quickly on the first one. So let's hope, because he's on my fantasy team, so let's hope that he comes back quick. I need him back.
We need it desperately. I tell you, we need Mika Zibanejad. He's having a great season.
Yep. All right. Speaking of fantasy hockey league transactions or injuries, another player that's on my team, goaltender Cam Talbot, was placed on injury reserve by the Edmonton Oilers on Thursday. Coach Todd McLellan said he will be out for at least 2 weeks. Talbot was injured during a 6-2 win against the Detroit Red Wings on the 22nd of November, McLellan said. Talbot finished that game and then played in consecutive wins for the 4-2 win at the Boston Bruins on November 26th and the 3-2 in overtime 3-2 in overtime against the Coyotes at Rogers Place on Tuesday. Talbot is 10-10-1 with a 3.00 goals against average and a .903 save percentage in 22 starts. He finished 4th in Vezina Trophy voting last season after leading the league with 44 wins in 73 games, finishing with 2.39 goals against average. So the numbers he's put up this year are definitely nowhere near where everybody expected them to be.
That's true. And, I've watched him play. I've seen him play very well this year. It's just a matter of inconsistency, which Edmonton cannot. They can't be inconsistent. They don't have depth on that team. If you stack them up against a healthy Anaheim Ducks team, for example, they don't have the depth that Anaheim has. So they can't afford to be inconsistent. They have to play well most every night.
Have you seen or heard what the injury was? Because they're saying he got hurt in the win against the Red Wings on the 22nd, but he also played on the 26th and the 28th. What was Tuesday? 28th.
It's the 28th. That's right.
So he played the 26th and the 28th, and only now they're saying he's got to sit.
Yeah, I have not heard anything about this injury, Wayne.
I'm wondering if this is a case where he's not playing well, and in order to bring up another goalie, they've got to he's got to be hurt,
right?
Quote unquote hurt.
Yeah.
Where nobody in the team's talking of how he's hurt, but either way he's hurt. So that would enable them to use the emergency clause and get a goaltender up there.
And that could very well be.
That's just pure speculation, whatever. But this is a benching, quote unquote, without it actually being one.
Right.
They're disguising it as an injury. So
wouldn't be surprised at all if
even
that's the case.
Even though they're not supposed to do that, but who's there to police it? Who's gonna go to Edmonton in November, December, and investigate when it's 40 below up there, right?
And they're certainly not going to tell you the inner workings of the team,
Right.
So, no, I wouldn't be surprised if that's what's going on here at all.
So, of course, we're speculating, but I'm frustrated because Talbot is my starting goalie, and I need him back because now I've got Robin Lehner as my backup. Oh boy, Buffalo, that's going to be bad. All right. Let's move on to suspensions and fines. Minnesota Wild defenseman Matt Dumba has been fined $5,000, the maximum allowable under the collective bargaining agreement for unsportsmanlike conduct during NHL Game 365 in Winnipeg on Monday, November 27th. The league announced Wednesday. The incident occurred at 20 minutes of the first period. Dumbo was assessed a minor penalty for unsportsmanlike conduct. So I didn't see the incident, so I'm not sure. Obviously, it happened after the whistle. If they're putting a time of 20 minutes of the first period, it happened basically right at the end of the first.
Right.
As they were heading into the locker room. So
did not see that play either, Wayne.
Yep. All right. Chicago Blackhawks forward Patrick Kane's been fined $5,000, maximum allowable in a collective bargaining agreement for slashing Anaheim Ducks forward Nick Ritchie during NHL game number 366 in Chicago on Monday, November 27th. The league announced on Wednesday. Didn't see that one either. There were a lot of these incidents over the past couple of weeks.
You're right.
The incident occurred at 15:47 of the third period. Kane was assessed a minor penalty for slashing. So, all right. Colorado Avalanche forward Gabriel Landeskog has been suspended for 4 games without pay for cross-checking Calgary Flames forward Matthew Tkachuk during the NHL game number 356 in Colorado on Saturday, November 25th. The Department of Player Safety announced on Tuesday. Under the terms of collective bargaining agreement and based on his average salary, the Landeskog will forfeit $119,815.
Ouch.
The incident occurred at 15:08 of the first period. He was assessed a minor penalty for cross-checking. I saw that play, and he just went a little overboard. He had Tkachuk kind of pinned behind the net, and Tkachuk was trying to get out from behind the net to get in front to a loose puck to try to put it in the goalie. And it first started with a cross-check right to the ribs, as Landeskog was just trying to prevent Tkachuk from coming back out front. And then right after that rib shot, he did it again, but this time the stick went up and got him right in the neck and, put him down on the ice. So, that was one of those cases where he's getting hit for the contact to the head for the most part.
Yeah,
is what
to
got
the
him
tune
in trouble.
Of $120,000.
Yeah, yeah. What could you do with that $120,000? Huh?
I tell you what, I'd have a new Jaguar sitting in the driveway,
or a paid-off mortgage, right?
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Winnipeg Jets defenseman Ben Chariot, or is it Chariot, has been fined $3,763, the maximum allowable under the collective bargaining agreement, for butt-ending Anaheim Ducks forward Corey Perry during the NHL game number 337 on Anaheim on Friday, November 24th. The NHL's player safety announced Saturday. The incident occurred at 14:22 of the second period. So this was a case where I don't think Chariot I
think that's right. Chariot
was targeting Perry. I think this was the fact that Corey Perry, I don't know if you know, is not a very well-liked player around the league. He's kind of like the Brad Marchand of the West. He's a pest. He talks trash. He's just, he gets under the skin of a lot of other players.
Right.
And I think this was a case where, if it wasn't Giroux on Winnipeg, it was going to be somebody else. But basically Winnipeg snapped, and they had basically had enough of what Perry was dishing out, and they wanted to put a stop to it. But I guess they crossed the line a little bit.
Yeah.
And I saw the play, and Corey Perry definitely sold the butt end. I mean, he really he went down like he got shot. So yeah, couldn't really tell from the video whether or not contact was actually made with Corey Perry, but he certainly made it look like it was. Actually, I think it did, because Corey Perry had a mess on his face, so
yeah.
He definitely did get hit, but because there was damage done. But anyway, and that's probably why Giroux ended up getting fined, is because of the damage to Perry's face that resulted from that. But all I'm saying is, Corey Perry probably didn't get that done to him completely out of the blue,
I'm looking at the difference, though, between what happened to Gabriel Landeskog and what happened to Ben Giroux. Ben Giroux got off really light.
Yeah, he did. Now, a lot of these fines are a proportion of their salary, too. And Landeskog is one of the higher paid players in the league, so, if you take 1% of his salary, or whatever the percentage would have been, 2%, whatever, then that's why he would have lost that much more.
Right.
So, yeah. And the next one we have, Chicago Blackhawks forward John Hayden has been fined $2,486, maximum allowable, for high-sticking Tampa Bay Lightning forward J.T. Brown during NHL game number 328 Tampa on Wednesday, November 22nd. The NHL's Department's Player Safety announced last Thursday. The incident occurred at 5:49 in the first period. Hayden was assessed a double minor penalty for high sticking. Another thing, too, that affects how much money these guys get fined is whether or not they are a repeat offender.
Right.
Obviously, the more you do it, the fines get ramped up. So Landeskog, and I think if I remember right, when I watched the video, they had mentioned that Landeskog, I think it was 3 years ago, got fined for an incident that had happened. But of course, he wasn't labeled a repeat offender in this case, just because it had been a while. But they still, tacked on that heavy fine for him. All right, another one. God, there's a lot of them this week. Nashville Predators forward Austin Watson has been suspended for 2 games without pay for boarding Colorado Avalanche forward Dominic Toninato during NHL Game 302 in Nashville on Saturday, November 18th. The Department of Player Safety announced back on the 19th. The incident occurred at 11:47 in the first period. Watson was assessed a major penalty in a game misconduct for boarding. Under the terms of collective bargaining agreement and based on his average annual salary, Watson will forfeit $11,827. Trying to remember if I saw that one. I don't think I did.
No, I didn't see that play either, Wayne, but I did see the next one.
The next one, yep. Philadelphia Flyers defenseman Radko Gudas. Oh, good old Radko.
Yep.
Has been suspended for 10 games without pay for slashing Winnipeg Jets forward Matthew Perreault during NHL game 284 in Winnipeg on Thursday the 16th. That was the last night we recorded. Yep. So that actually happened we recorded early that night, so it would have been after we recorded.
Yes.
The NHL's Department of Player Safety announced on the 19th. The incident occurred at 9:50 of the first period. Gudas was assessed a major and a game for slashing. Gudas is considered a repeat offender under the terms of the collective bargaining agreement, and based on his average annual salary, will forfeit $408,536.
Oh. And let me tell you, it was ruthless. It was not only that, it was stupid. But I mean, the announcers, I watched the replay of it. I saw it right after it happened. And Radko Gudas is lucky he didn't get more than that. He really could have been severely, it could have been 25 games.
Yep, that chop that he put on Perreault was it was reckless.
Yeah.
It was just a reckless retaliation to something that, Perreault was giving him shots in the back, little cross checks that a lot of players have to deal with. And Gudas just finally, lost it and just tomahawked him basically. And like the Department of Player Safety said, he's considered a repeat offender. And of course, I have said on this podcast on more than one occasion how I feel about Gudas, but
yeah, he's a rotten player. He is.
Yep.
He is. I don't care what Philadelphia fans. He is. He's made some really costly, just stupid moves to get players off the ice, and I think he's a hitman. I really do. I think, for lack of a better way of saying it.
Well, they're a dying breed in this league, and he's one of the few that remain, for sure. As far as I'm concerned, obviously you feel the same way.
Yep.
So, 10 games. That's, obviously if he wasn't a repeat offender, it wouldn't have been that. It probably would have been 2. But they're trying to put a stop to it.
That's for sure.
Making him forfeit $500,000. That's, Well, 10 games is about 1/8 of the season, so that's a long time to sit down.
Yeah.
All right. Detroit Red Wings forward Luke Witkowski was suspended for 10 games by the NHL Department of Player Safety on November 16th. Witkowski was automatically suspended under Rule 70.6 for actions during a game against the Flames on Wednesday. He returned to the ice to take part in an altercation after being escorted off by an official. Rule 70.6 states in part, any player who has been ordered to the dressing room by officials and returns to his bench or the ice surface for any reason before the appropriate time shall be assessed a game misconduct and shall be suspended automatically without pay for the next 10 regular league and or playoff games. Witkowski has no points in 8 games this season. He would be eligible to return on December 11th. Matthew Tkachuk was suspended 1 game for his role in the same incident. And of course, Tkachuk plays for the Flames.
Right.
I saw this. Did you see this?
It seems to me I do remember seeing this. Yes, I could be wrong, Wayne.
Yeah, it was a big kerfuffle, I guess, that broke out on the ice. And then when they broke it up, it was getting close to the end of either the game or end of the period. So rather than have the players go into the penalty box where they couldn't be released anyway because the penalties were going to match up, they decided to send him to the locker room. And Witkowski came, of course, the tunnel to go in that particular arena to go to the dressing room goes right through the Detroit bench, which would also be at the very end of the bench, close to the opposing team's, the end of their bench.
Right.
And essentially what had happened is, somebody said something, and as he was leaving the ice, and he came back out. But he was only gone, he might have been 4 feet off the bench, like towards the dressing room. About 4 feet down the tunnel. Not very far, when he decided to come back to the bench. And he claims he had no idea that rule was in place, or at least that particular rule affected this particular situation, but apparently it does because they're sitting him down for 10 games.
Yeah.
So, and the article didn't say how much money he would lose, but, he's probably not a very high-paid guy to begin with, so his fine won't be too bad. All right, next one. Tampa Bay Lightning forward Cedric Paquette will have a hearing with the NHL Department of Player Safety on Thursday for boarding against Boston Bruins defenseman Torrey Krug. The incident occurred at 2:26 of the second period at TD Garden on Wednesday. And this was obviously last night when this game played. Paquette received a minor penalty for boarding, and he and Bruins forward Frank Vetrano each received a minor penalty for roughing. Vetrano also received a minor penalty for tripping. Falling grounds are being considered for supplemental discipline, boarding. However, the Department of Player Safety retains the right to make adjustments, blah, 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 blah. All right. So I actually didn't see the hit, because I wasn't really watching the game. I was working on my living room, to be honest with you, while this game was on. So I had the game on TV in the other room, and when big things happen, I would run in here and check it, but I never checked it for this, only because the announcers didn't make that big of a deal about this particular incident. So I did miss the actual incident there. All right. That's it for suspensions and fines. Man, there were a lot this week.
Yes, there were.
The boys need to learn to behave. All right, that leads us into other interesting story. Connor McDavid apparently has been wearing the wrong size skates this whole time, at least according to a well-intentioned rink worker in Boston. The Edmonton Oilers captain tried to rent skates with his brother Cam and a friend at Boston Common Frog Pond on Saturday, only to be told that he was asking for the wrong size. The lady who was trying to give me some advice on what size I should go with, McDavid said Tuesday. I went with it. I wasn't going to argue with her. McDavid was the winner of the fastest skater competition last season with a time of 13.02, but imagine how fast he'd gone if he'd been wearing the proper size skates. Even though the fit was unnatural, McDavid said his rented boots were fine. The skates were a little big, but they did the trick, he said. So why you say he doesn't have his skates? Well, everybody who's played hockey knows that if you play outdoors, if you've got access to a separate pair of skates outdoors, what you play indoors, that's a good idea, because the little imperfections and debris that can be found in outdoor ice, leaves, sticks, dust, just wreaks havoc on blades.
Yeah.
So McDavid is certainly not going to take his skates that he's using to play NHL games outdoors to, go there. So he ends up renting a pair of skates. But how cool would that be? I mean, the lady who's waiting on him is lining these guys up with skates. He's renting skates, has no freaking clue that she's getting skates for arguably the best player in the game.
Yeah. What a humble guy, too. He's like, I'm not going to argue with her. I'll wear them.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny.
She's probably got this general rule. The general rule with skates is you go 2 sizes smaller than what your shoe size is.
Yeah.
And that's probably what she did, is she went, 2 sizes smaller, and he may want his tight, and he might go 2.5 sizes smaller than his shoe size. No, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Just go a size smaller. Who knows?
Yeah.
It must have been. But the other thing I thought of, too, is at this rink at Boston Common in Boston, there's a pair of skates sitting in the rental shack where they store the skates that Connor freaking McDavid has worn these skates.
You don't think they took them out of circulation?
Huh?
You don't think they took them out of circulation?
Well, no. The woman had no clue who he was, so...
Good point.
So he probably gave the skates right back. They walked off without incident, and now nobody knows. So
that's right.
So there is a pair of skates sitting in that Boston Common shack at the Frog Pond that are worn by Connor McDavid, and someone else will just get to wear them as well. So interesting little story I had to add in there.
It is.
All right, let's talk about some outdoor hockey. The NHL announced on the 19th that the Philadelphia Flyers will play host to the Pittsburgh Penguins outdoors at Lincoln Financial Field, home of the NFL's Philadelphia Eagles, on Saturday, February 23rd, 2019, as part of the 2019 Coors Light NHL Stadium Series. This will be part 2 in the outdoor battle for Pennsylvania. Penguins took round 1 in 2017, playing to a crowd of more than 67,000 at Heinz Field in Pittsburgh, when they edged out the Flyers in a 4-2 win. The game will be the Flyers' 4th regular season appearance outdoors and the Penguins' 5th such game. The 2019 Coors Light Stadium Series will mark the 6th consecutive year that Coors Light has been the title sponsor. And I believe the article didn't say it, but I believe this is the first game that the Philadelphia Flyers will be hosting an outdoor game.
Right. Well, they did host the outdoor game against us in 2012.
Where was that one played?
That was played at the baseball park where the Phillies
play. Okay. So they have had one in Philly already.
First Citizens Park.
Yep.
Right?
Okay. Citizens Bank Park, yeah.
Citizens Bank Park.
Yep. Okay.
And we actually won that game 3-2.
Well, these outdoor games tend to go more often than not to the visiting team because they get a lot less BS to deal with.
That's true.
At least that's my theory anyway.
That's true. No, that's a good point, Wayne.
But yeah, once again, Pittsburgh Penguins are going to be in an outdoor game. How often, seems to be every year. Let's just have 1 year. This is a plea to the NHL. Let's just have 1 year where we have outdoor games where neither the Pittsburgh Penguins or the Chicago Blackhawks play in the game. It seems like one of those two teams is in one of the outdoor games every single year.
Yep.
Enough is enough. How many teams are there out there? There's like 6 or 8 teams in the NHL that hasn't even played in one of these games once.
That's true.
Let alone however many times the Penguins and the Blackhawks have played. This will be the 5th game outdoors for the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Carolina Hurricanes haven't played in one. Now, granted, the Carolina Hurricanes are no threat to host one anytime soon because, even I would say, even with every one of the rabid Carolina fans they're not going to fit. I don't see them selling out a football stadium.
I agree.
even though technically, if you do it in January and February, it is cold enough here to be able to do an outdoor game. It absolutely is.
Yep.
The misconception that Carolina is really, really warm is, yeah, it's warmer than up north, but it's still cool enough. If you can do outdoor games in LA, you can do outdoor games here in Carolina because the climate's roughly the same. All right, let's move on. Last Saturday, the Calgary Flames were traveling to the Washington, D.C., but they were also traveling back in time. This was an interesting story. This was pretty cool. With the team opting for a chartered train over flying, they decided their threads would also have to match the style of transportation. Hours after they defeated the Philadelphia Flyers in overtime, Flames donned their finest old-school attire to ride the rails to the nation's capital. Each player wore either a fedora or a newsboy cap, and many of the Flames carried canes and pretended to smoke cigars. There were even a few pairs of saddle shoes in the mix. Forward Chris Versteeg went all out with a red satin jacket and matching shoes. Troy Brouwer had a pocket watch attached to his vest, and goalie Mike Smith even used a prop pipe. Mark Giordano and Travis Hamonic also had winning looks. The Flames fully committed to this one. There were no iPad or cell phone games on the train. The team instead opted for cards. What a cool way to do it.
That was, and I love those pictures.
They fully embraced the whole, because that's how the teams used to travel. They traveled by train back in the day. Back before jet flight. That's how all the teams got around, was traveling by train. So I don't know if they just... They call it a chartered train. I don't know if they had a whole train to themselves or if they just had their own car on the Amtrak. I don't know how that would work in modern day society. I'd imagine they would just add a car for the team and then have the team have their own car. That would be my guess, rather than have a whole train to themselves. But anyway, interesting story.
That is.
All right, back to the outdoor games. 2019 Bridgestone NHL Winter Classic. They finally officially announced it. One of the worst kept secrets in hockey, because I think we alluded to it 2 weeks ago in our last show that we had seen rumors that that the game was going to take place, or where the game was going to take place and who was going to be involved. But they officially announced it while we were away on our little 2-week break, that the Chicago Blackhawks and the Boston Bruins are going to play outdoors on January 1st, 2019 at Notre Dame Stadium, home of the University of Notre Dame Fighting Irish football team, the NHL announced on the 18th of November. The New Year's Day matchup will be Chicago's 4th. Again, Chicago getting to be outdoors all the time. Of course, I can't say much. This will be the Bruins, 3rd, I think? Mm-hmm. Yeah, this will be the NHL's 3rd appearance. And the Chicago Blackhawks' previous appearances in the NHL Winter Classic include the 2000 NHL Winter Classic, 2009, against the Detroit Red Wings at Wrigley Field, which was a 6-4 loss for them, and a road trip to play the Capitals in the 2015 at Nationals Park, another 3-2 loss, and a matchup against the St. Louis Blues in 2017 at Busch Stadium, which was a 4-1 loss. So Blackhawks don't do too well in these. They're 0-3 in these outdoor games. Yeah, that's why the NHL keeps putting them in there. Eventually, they're going to win one.
Yeah, that's right.
So the Boston Bruins were the home club in their 2 NHL Winter Classic games, a 2-1 overtime win against the Flyers at Fenway Park in 2010. And in fact, that was the first outdoor game where the home team won the game. And then a 5-1 loss to the Canadiens in 2016 at Gillette Stadium in Foxborough. And that was by far, for me anyway, the most disappointing outdoor game that I ever saw, because the Bruins were never really in that game. And the Blackhawks and Bruins, 2 of our most historic franchises, will be meeting outdoors for the first time at the 2019 Bridgestone NHL Winter Classic. NHL Gary Bettman said, Notre Dame Stadium, with its capacity approaching 80,000, will provide an ideal setting for its groundbreaking event and will host the largest live audience ever to witness a game by either of these 2 teams. And immediately when I heard of this, I got in touch with my sister. She lives in the Chicago area.
Oh, yeah.
So I tweeted, or actually I just messaged her saying, hey, this thing's coming up in a year or so, year plus a couple of months, and I want to be there. And I've got a free place to stay that's about a 2-hour drive from the venue, so...
That is
and
really great.
She responded back saying, yeah, if you want to come up, come on up. So all I got to do now is secure tickets to the place.
Get tickets.
Yep.
God.
And I can make the drive and go.
Incredible.
And I'm sure she put you up, too, if you want to go.
I will seriously consider that one. And I have a little time to make a decision on it, but that would be a lot of fun.
And I've never been in Notre Dame Stadium. And, of course, everybody knows the lore of Notre Dame football and the legend behind it, and the stadium they've been playing there for generations, and the venue, great choice for a venue.
Absolutely,
because they did Wrigley Field. You can't really do that again. The only other place I could consider would be Soldier Field in Chicago, but I think they're shying away from the NFL stuff because there's that uncertainty that if the NFL team makes the playoffs, you've got an issue,
right?
Especially if I don't know if that January 1 game falls on a Saturday or Sunday or not. Let me look real quick. Oh, it's a Tuesday. So it shouldn't interfere with the NFL schedule.
Right.
But even though, you still got there, if there was a game on the 30th, they can't put a rink up in 2 days.
Right.
So I think that's why they're kind of shying away from the NFL stadiums and going more for the college ones. But what a great spot to have a game.
Absolutely.
For sure. All right. And the next story I've got is another bit of comedy, I guess, if you want to look at it. An absent-minded moment for Jonathan Drouin resulted in a splatter into the ice and a roasting from his captain. Montreal Canadiens forward forgot that he had gotten new skates fitted with his old blades, so when he laced up for practice Tuesday, he put on his old skates, which no longer had blades in them. And when he stepped out onto the ice, well, he went splat. Dumbfounded and giggling Drouin had to be dragged off the ice, and his teammates got a good laugh out of it, including forward Max Pacioretty, who roasted him for his silly mistake. So, unfortunately, there was no video of it, because that was one of the things I saw in an interview where the press was interviewing Max Pacioretty, and he asked the reporters, hey, did anybody get video of that? But all they got video of was his teammates picking him up and dragging him off the ice, because if you're out there with a pair of skates with no blades, you're not. It's like a deer walking on ice. You've got no grip whatsoever. 'Cause all you got is just a plastic holder down there. So it's kind of interesting though that they would use, if they got new skates, why would they go with old blades? I guess the player likes the way they feel, I guess. Because nowadays those blades can be popped on and popped off at a moment's notice. It wasn't always that way. It used to require all kinds of hardware and tools to change blades. But now there's if you look at the pair of modern day skates, back near the heel, you see a little black spot on the white holder. That's actually a latch. If they squeeze the back of the heel of the skate, they can basically, that's a latch that they can unlatch the skate blade, take it right off and put a new blade on, and just within a few seconds.
Wow.
So modern technology, right? It's probably why the skates break so often nowadays. You never used to see players' skates blowing up on the ice.
Right.
All right. Another story I saw, and there's a couple of related stories here. The NHL is being cautious about further expansion and wants to keep current franchises where they are, Commissioner Gary Bettman said on Friday. And I don't know if that was last Friday, not this past, way back on the 17th. Answering questions at a Chamber of Commerce of Metropolitan Montreal luncheon celebrating the NHL's 100th anniversary, Commissioner Bettman said that the NHL was assimilating its 31st team. The Golden Knights, which began play the season, had 16 teams in the Eastern Conference, 15 in the Western. And he said, "We're not going to expand just to satisfy notions of symmetry," the commissioner said. "We're being very careful, very cautious. We'll be very deliberate if we go through another expansion process, but I can't tell you today that that's something we're going to run off and do. If the circumstances dictate consideration of another expansion team or opportunity, then that's something the Board of Governors will ultimately look at the time." Mm-hmm. In a press conference afterward, Commissioner Bettman was asked about interest in the NHL from Houston and Quebec City and teams looking for new arenas such as the Coyotes, Calgary Flames, the Islanders, and Senators. He said, "It's great to know that there are lots of places that are interested in having a franchise that don't, but we're not running around actively soliciting interest," Commissioner said. "We listen to whoever wants to come talk to us, and we're aware of the interest. But our preference is to have our franchises right where they are, and to the extent some franchises need new facilities, we're hoping that they can achieve that result where they are." Tillman Fertitta, owner of the NBA's Houston Rockets, has declared interest in putting an NHL team in Toyota Center in Houston. "As I've mentioned before, I'm very interested in the possibility of bringing the NHL to Houston, but it will have to be a deal that works for my organization, the city, the fans of NHL throughout the region, and the NHL Board of Governors," Fertitta said in a statement of his verified Twitter account on Thursday. "We're in the very early stages of evaluating what opportunities may exist, but still look forward to a thorough process." And then Commissioner Bettman would not confirm or deny meeting with Fertitta, although I thought I heard reports that he was seen in Houston recently. I don't like speculating about things that may or may not happen, Commissioner said. If at some point there's real interest and the circumstances are right, we'll take a look at it. That's as far as it goes right now. And then he reiterated the NHL's position on Quebec City and the Videotron Center. He said the city and the province chose to build a building, and we told them every step of the way that we are not promising you a team. He said, if you build the building, you will need to build it with the understanding that you might never get a team. That doesn't mean they'll never get a team. That means we made no commitment whatsoever. Commissioner Bettman also said during the luncheon that when he started in 93, NHL venues were about $430 million, and this season the league will generate revenues between $4.5 billion and $5 billion.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's a tenfold increase since 1993.
Amazing.
That's a testament to everybody who's involved in this endeavor. Commissioner said it's a testament to the players, and the players have done well as well. Commissioner Bettman said the average salary when he started was about $300,000 and it is now more than $3 million. Any system that's going to work to make a sport strong has to be fair to everybody, he said. But in the final analysis, what makes the system work is that it's good for the fans because all of our teams can afford to compete and be competitive, which is why we have extraordinary competitive balance. Commissioner Bettman said during the press conference that the NHL tried to schedule an outdoor game in Montreal this season to celebrate the league's founding here on November 26th, 1917. Unfortunately, the city of Montreal does not have a facility that would have enabled us to put on an outdoor game. Commissioner said it's that simple. Well, that explains why Montreal hasn't hosted one.
Yeah.
They don't have a venue.
Right.
Which makes sense. The biggest football stadium they have is for the CFL team, which, CFL stadiums are not that big. And then baseball, they only have minor league. They don't have the, imagine putting one in the old Olympia Dome or whatever you want to call it, the Olympic Dome.
Yeah.
Of course, that's not an outdoor venue. The roof is permanently attached to that building. Does that still exist?
I don't know if that still exists or not, to be honest with you.
Maybe a Montreal fan can tell us, or someone who lives there. Tweet us.
That's right.
Commissioner Bettman said that it wasn't the only question the size of Percival Molson Memorial Stadium, which seats about 25,000. It was the infrastructure needed to stage a regular season NHL game, from locker rooms to training rooms for the players to restrooms for the fan. That's the stadium where the CFL teams play. We looked at everything, including a pop-up stadium. Commissioner said, you've got to remember, these are real games played under conditions that generate points that could mean the difference in making the Stanley Cup playoffs. We looked at all of our options, and it wasn't feasible to do it. My events people were ready to have me thrown out of the window of my office because we pushed very, very hard, and I just didn't work. Canadiens owner Jeff Molson hasn't given up hope for an outdoor game in the future. We did work very, very hard to try to make it work, and we'll continue to work hard to make something work, he said. We just weren't able to fit it into the centennial year. All right, that was a long article on that. But in a related article, before we discuss further, a local TV news station out of here, so this one, not a lot of people are going to be talking about because of the fact that it was a local TV station here that was talking about it. And in fact, I'm going to insert the audio from WRAL Sports. I think he's the head of the sports department at WRAL. Jeff Gravely came on. I don't know if you saw this in the local news here.
I have not.
Oh, okay. But I'm going to insert the audio from that news report. It's a local TV station here, and they're actually the TV station that the parent company is also a minority owner of the Hurricanes. So, take that as part of the report.
Since July, we've been reporting that the investment group led by Chuck Greenberg has been in negotiations to buy the Carolina Hurricanes. I just got off the phone with Greenberg, who says he is still in the game, but the Hurricanes are looking elsewhere. Team president Don Waddell told us they are in discussions with 3 potential new owners. One is Dallas billionaire businessman Thomas Dundon. One of the advantages that the 3 groups have over the Greenberg team is a better and more substantial financial package. The 3 groups currently in discussion have heard this from Peter Karmanos and Commissioner Gary Bettman.
The first thing that Commissioner Bettman says, this franchise is not moving. If you're looking to move it, move on to your next sport because, this franchise is staying in Raleigh. So all 3 groups that we're speaking with right now currently obviously know that, and they're pursuing it to keep it here in Raleigh.
Are we closer to a resolution or further away?
Oh, I think we're much closer because when you're dealing with, again, the capital's there. That's when you're buying these assets for hundreds of millions of dollars and you have the money to do it, then I think that puts you a step closer right off the bat.
One thing to remember, quickly in terms of a pro franchise transaction may not be quickly by your definition.
Jeff Gravely, the local guy here, met with Don Waddell, who's the, the president of business operations or something.
I think that's right,
He basically reports directly to the owner of the team. And they had a little meeting, and Mr. Waddell said, we have not heard from Mr. Chuck Greenberg. He's the guy that's been looking to buy the team out of, the guy out of Texas. He says, we have not heard from Mr. Chuck Greenberg in 4 or 5 weeks. Truthfully, he's still out there, but not one of the groups we're talking to right now, team president Don Waddell said on Wednesday. Chuck's whole goal was to raise the capital. He got to a point where it stalled on him. We gave him every opportunity to raise capital, and at the end of the day, to the best of our knowledge, he has not been able to do that. So it looks like the Hurricanes are looking elsewhere, and apparently they have other interested parties. Mm-hmm. Sources told WRAL News in July that Karmanos and Greenberg had worked out a deal to sell the team, but no details were ever released, and it never was finalized. Since then, other groups have been involved, including one led by Dallas businessman Thomas Dundon. Dundon, who's 44, is the chairman of Topgolf International Incorporated and former CEO and former president of Santander Consumers USA, Inc. Waddell said Wednesday that the Hurricanes and former owner Peter Karmanos Jr. continue to work with several groups who are interested in buying the franchise. Multiple groups are actively pursuing the franchise, Waddell said Wednesday. There's no doubt at some point something will get done. Waddell wouldn't confirm any other names involved in the ongoing talks, but did reiterate that Karmanos and the NHL are committed to keeping the franchise in Raleigh. All three of the groups have been told multiple times by league sources and by Pete that this team cannot be moved, Waddell said. Everyone looking at buying the team is looking at it with the intent of running it in Raleigh. It's definitely high on Peter's list and high on the list of the NHL. Waddell said Raleigh has proven itself as a hockey market in the past and that the team is continuing to make progress as it seeks to get back to the playoffs for the first time since the 2008-2009 season. This market has proven it. We're making progress right now, and the league is stated to everyone that people shouldn't waste their time if they want to move the team, he said. Once the sale is finalized, Waddell said Karmanos hopes to stay involved with the club in some way. His preference is to stay involved. He's been in the game 40 to 50 years, and he's got great knowledge, and he's in the Hockey Hall of Fame, Waddell said of Karmanos. Pete was open and honest about the desire to sell the team, and people were disappointed. Pete has taken a lot of bad hits because he was open and honest. It's unfair because of what he's done. So, with all that, what's your thoughts?
I'm surprised to hear that the deal basically is scuttled, I guess, with
sounds like Greenberg couldn't.
Mr. Greenberg.
Yeah, sounds like Greenberg he just couldn't raise the money.
Right.
But and when you listen to the audio, I'm going to insert it into the podcast here at some point, either right before I read all that or right after, one or the other. You get a sense that it looks encouraging that the other groups that they're looking at, finding the money is not going to be a problem for some of these other groups. So, and it's also encouraging that the NHL seems to be holding firm that this team's not going anywhere.
Right. That is good news.
Which is good because the Hurricanes are doing this big, huge promotion where a fan is going to win a 10-year season ticket package. And what a shame that would be to win a 10-year season ticket package if 4 years into it, the team moves out of town.
Yeah, they'd have to compensate him somehow.
Yep. So I'm desperately trying to get my name in the hat for that 10-year season ticket package. That would be an amazing get if I could get on that.
That'd be a good gift.
Yeah. But anyway, so with all that said, with the Bettman comments and all the local comments coming out of the local market here, it looks like the NHL is I don't know, the writing on the wall says they're probably going to add a 32nd team at some point. They're just in no hurry to do so.
Right. I think they're going to be extremely cautious about it, pick the right market. Apparently, they really pushed hard on Quebec City and didn't work out.
Quebec City is pushing hard on them to get a team because they built an arena.
Right.
Gambling, essentially, that they're going to come because that arena can't be making much money if you don't have a regular tenant. I mean, yeah, the Quebec Ramparts play there in the junior league, but they don't need an arena that big. for a junior team. They're probably not even using the upper bowl for those games. And of course, you can have concerts and stuff at there, at that venue as well. But I believe the old Quebec Arena still exists as well. I could be wrong on that, but I think it does. The old, what was it called?
Oh, you got me on that one.
I can't remember. Le Colisée is in Quebec is what it was. That's what it was. The Colisée. So yeah, but I don't know. I guess we'll see. Time will tell.
Time will tell.
So we'll bring you any news. We live right here in the Raleigh market, so if anything comes out concerning the Carolina Hurricanes and the sale of the team, we'll probably hear about it before anybody else. So good. Well, that brings us to the power ranking. And
all right.
Whose turn is it? My turn?
It is your turn this week.
My turn this week. All right. I did do one just in case it was my turn. I wasn't 100% sure. So I will start at number 16. I've got Chicago. And at number 15, I've got Pittsburgh. So they've fallen a bit. Number 14, I've got Dallas, who's up from, probably this is their first appearance in the top 16, isn't it?
I believe that's right. Yep.
At 13, I've got the Rangers. At 12, I've got San Jose. At 11, I've got Washington, which I believe is their first appearance in the top 16. Number 10, I've got LA, who were at one point number 1. Vegas, a former top 5 team, is now at number 9. Toronto, another former number 1, is down to 8. New Jersey, who was probably in the top 3 at one point, is down at number 7. The Islanders are at number 6. Number 5, I've got Columbus. Number 4, I've got Nashville, which is probably the highest they've been all season. Number 3, I've got Winnipeg. Number 2, I've got St. Louis. And for the time being, I kept Tampa Bay at number 1.
Can't fault any of those, actually.
Right now, I've got Tampa Bay, St. Louis is almost as 1-1A at this point.
Right.
Because both teams are playing extremely well. A couple of notables. 8-18 is Boston. They're just outside the top 16. And if they continue to win, they'll find themselves in that top 16 before long. And then, of course, Carolina, I've got them at number 20, and which is higher than what their points indicate. But they have all those games in hand where all they have to do is win those.
That's right.
And they will definitely be in that ballpark for those. A couple of the notables, Montreal is starting to climb. I've got them at 26, but I fully expect them to climb higher as long as Carey Price stays healthy. I don't know if there's any other ones there that you wanted to mention. I have Arizona number 31, which they've been there all season long, but it was a toss-up for me. I almost put Buffalo there.
Either one of those guys, yeah.
But Ottawa, how far have they fallen? I've got them at 29.
Yeah, they're plummeting.
Yep.
They've lost 7 in a row, haven't
they? 6 or 7 in a row, yeah. And the big thing that's really shocking is since the trade for Matt Duchene,
right.
Matt Duchene is scoreless. He's yet to score not even an assist for Ottawa. So right now, Ottawa fans are wondering, was that move a bad move for them?
Right.
So, all right, let's take a look ahead at the schedules coming up, and we're well into the podcast, so we're not going to go day by day talking about all the games, but we will touch on our 3 teams because there's a bunch of good games coming up this week. But first and foremost, the Bruins are on the road at Philadelphia on the 2nd. They're at Nashville on the 4th, and that is it for them for this week. And actually, the game in Nashville is going to be their last game outside the Eastern time zone until their Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton trip in mid-February.
Wow.
So, yeah, Boston will be playing in the Eastern time zone for a couple of months after that Nashville game on the 4th.
Very interesting.
Yep. So they only have 2 games this week. Carolina has 3 games. They're at the Rangers on the 1st. They're against Florida on the 2nd and at Vancouver on the 5th. And one thing to note about the Carolina Hurricanes is they only have 5 home games in December. Now, they've got 15 games total in December. They've got a very busy schedule in December, Carolina does, because they got all those games in hand. They got to get caught up, but only 5 games at home. And I think 3 of them are Saturday nights.
Right.
Which is good. Which is good for locals anyway. If they can't sell out on a Saturday night or at least fill the building mostly, then they got issues. So now the Rangers have a light schedule.
Yeah, they real light. We played tomorrow night against Carolina, of course. That was what you mentioned. And then next Tuesday night on the NHL Network, I believe it's an NHL Network game. I should actually make sure that. It is a nationally televised game anyways. They play the Pittsburgh Penguins in Pittsburgh. So that will be a test but I don't think Matt Murray will be back before then, so it should be interesting.
Yep.
It is an NBC Sports Network game.
Yep.
So that should be a great game. Don't miss it.
Yep. And as for the rest of the league, if you're wondering how your teams are going to be doing, I do have links to the schedules of all the teams coming up over the next week right in the show notes of this podcast. All right, let's move on to our minor league hockey minute. And I'll get mine out of the way because it's kind of it's not a too earth-shattering story, but I wanted to point out, we talked about briefly last year, and we haven't really talked about it at all this year, about the Champions Hockey League. Remember this league?
Vaguely.
It's in Europe, and it basically is a league made up of a whole bunch of teams that are scattered throughout Europe. Some Finnish teams that are basically pro teams that play in pro leagues. Like Sweden has their league, and Finland has their league, and Germany, and so on and so on. Every country's got their own league. Well, the Champions League is basically they're taking a few teams out of all those professional leagues over there and putting them together. They play a very shortened schedule. They only play a few games here and there. But this league is already headed to their quarterfinal for the whole season.
Yeah.
Now, they've played in their quote-unquote regular season of this league. Each team played 6 games. So this is a very shortened, it's kind of like a tournament, but the tournament takes place over the period of several months. It actually started way back in August. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pools. Each pool has 4 teams. So there's 32 teams involved total in this Champions League. And they're from all over, England, Sweden, Finland, all over the place. I don't believe any KHL teams are involved in this particular league, though. I don't see that. I don't see any KHL teams in there. So it's pretty much all the leagues outside the KHL are playing in this Champions League. And not every team from all these various leagues. It's Champions League, so it's basically they pick 2 or 3 of the better teams. I'm not sure exactly how the teams are chosen for the league, and then they play outside their normal league schedule in their country league. They're playing this additional league. So it's very shortened schedule, spread out over several months, but over the regular season standings, each team played 6 games, and then the top 16 teams advanced, which probably was the top 2 in each pool, advanced on, and we are now already into the quarterfinal. And the reason I mentioned it this week is because those games are coming right up.
Yeah.
And NHL Network is actually going to be televising at least one of them. I saw an advertisement where the NHL is going to be advertising at least one, maybe even more. I didn't see the full details of the advertisement of the Champions League games. But in the quarterfinal, and I'm trying to pull it up real quick here. There it is. All right, you have, and I'm going to butcher all these names, of course. Oh, hang on, I got to get there. All right, on December 5th, and the way the quarterfinals work is there's a first game and a return game. So it's basically a 2-game. I think it's a 2-game total goals, and they play a home and home. So on December 5th is the first game for each quarterfinals. So Ochelari Trinek, and I couldn't even tell you what league they're playing out of, is playing against Brynäs IF. The other games are JYP. These names are unbelievable. Anyway, I'm not even going to do this. I've included links to all of this stuff. There's basically 4 games taking place on December 5th at, I don't know if this is local time, our time. What day of the week does December 5th fall on?
That's going to be a Tuesday.
It's going to be a Tuesday. Okay, so it probably is our time. The times are showing 11, 12, 1:15, and 2. Obviously, they're taking place almost simultaneously. Probably our time, because we would play at 11 in the morning. Because over in Europe, that would make it around 6, 7 p.m. So on a Tuesday night. So that's probably our time. So anyway, if you want to watch any of these games, and I'm sure it's pretty decent hockey, there are some of the better teams over in Europe that are playing outside the KHL. They're going to have some games on, at least one game anyway, on the NHL Network. We probably can't play all of the games because, 11, 12, 1:15, and 2, they're almost simultaneous start times. Right. So be interesting. And then on December 12th is the quote-unquote return game where those same teams play against each other a second time a week later. And roughly in the middle of the afternoon, our time it says all times are local to our device. So, yeah. Right. So 11 o'clock Eastern is the first start time of these games. But anyway, that was my story. wanted to point it out there that if you want to see something other than NHL hockey, we've got that option. NHL Network will be showing at least one of those games. Just
so
as
that
something
will
different.
knock it down to a semifinals then, right?
So yeah, the winners of these quarters will knock it down to a semi, and then you'll have a final. So
very good.
But the last game that was played prior to this December 5th was November 7th. So there's huge gaps between the games. That's why this Champions League, there's very few games, but it's taking place over a long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure,
Very good.
Kind of like trying to figure out who the best team in Europe is outside the KHL is what this league is all about. All right, what do you got?
My story pales in comparison, Wayne. But, it does. Yours is interesting. I'm gonna. I won't be able to watch those games live, but if I can get a replay of it, I certainly will.
Or DVR it.
But that's right. DVR. But I went on the AHL website again this week, and I did some looking around trying to find stuff, and I found a very interesting article in regards to the Charlotte Checkers. They have a broadcaster for their games. His name is Jason Shia, and he actually has been a broadcaster for them for a number of years. But the article is entitled "Broadcaster Shia Steps In for Checkers." Jason Shia is a familiar voice for most Charlotte Checkers fans. He's been the team's broadcaster since its ECHL days in 2007. The Detroit native has also been known to fill in between the pipes at practice for both home and away teams over the years.
Boy, that's a jack of all trades.
That is. But on Sunday, this past Sunday, a different opportunity came his way. I was actually on the ice. I was actually on the ice skating with the injured guys on the team when Coach Mike Vellucci walked out on the ice and said, "Neds is not going to be able to make it today. I want you to back up the game for me." So despite picking up a win the day before, Alex Nedeljkovic, who we saw a couple weeks ago when we went to the game, woke up sick with the flu and was not even able to make it to the game to the arena to watch the team with no other goalie. And
got to dress two.
Pardon me?
And you got to dress two.
You have to dress two. That's right. With no other goalies on the roster and in need of a body for the afternoon's tilt, Shia was the next choice.
Wow.
For those out of the know, having a broadcaster serve as a backup goaltender for a professional team is actually, the way he puts it here, is rather a wacky idea, but you'd be hard-pressed to find a more qualified replacement than Shia. I really started goaltending seriously when I became a broadcaster, said Shia. For my first team, I played in the UHL, and I practiced almost every week because our starting goalie played every single game and did not want to practice on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. So I would practice on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and it just snowballed from there. The one thing about having a goalie is if they need one, you're in the net. Over the last 12 years of playing with these guys, you just get better because they make you better. A consummate pro, Shia's first thought was not about the hockey game, but was centered toward his main line of work. My concern was with the broadcast because that's what I do. I'm the broadcaster, said Shia, who will make his, and was really interesting, Wayne, he will make his NHL debut next month in the booth when he fills in for John Forsland on the Carolina Hurricanes television broadcast.
I think he already did.
Pardon me?
I think he already did. Somebody filled in for John Forsland recently because John was doing an NBC Sports. Maybe it was somebody else. Maybe it was the radio guy.
It might have been.
Yeah.
It might have been. But according to this article, he's scheduled to make his debut next month.
Okay. Yeah, somebody already did fill in for John Forsland. Because I remember that game. I think it was one of the broadcasters for the Checkers that came up and did that game.
Wow, okay. Then he may have been in there.
Yep.
Because I believe he's the broadcaster. But anyways, slated to become the second emergency backup goalie in Charlotte's AHL history, last season they had another situation come up in Manitoba where Byron Spriggs came to the team's rescue on the road in his home province. Shia had some things to take care of before puck drop. First and foremost was preparing the night's radio broadcast, which would be handled by Checkers Vice President of Hockey Operations Derek Wilkinson and Director of Finance Jamie Black, both of whom had extensive pro hockey careers. While the rest of the team began their warm-up practices, Shia made sure his makeshift broadcast duo was ready to go. Wilkie seemed pretty excited, and he's very, very good on the mic, said Shia. His ability to talk and ad-lib is so underrated, but play-by-play is a skill set, and it's very hard to just jump into it. The entire game, I was wondering how it was going. I was looking up, going, I wonder what they could possibly be saying right now. But I'll go back and give it a listen, and I'm sure they did okay. Yeah. With his actual job covered, Shia turned his sights to the job that night, which in his mind was pretty simple. Basically, he had to warm the bench. Yeah. But you never know. You never know.
What if Jeremy Smith, who played that game in net for Charlotte, would have gotten hurt?
And that's what and of course that's what he said later on in the article. It does go on quite extensively, but he said he could have counted in his mind that if he were actually in net, he would have probably lost the game for the Checkers 15-0, because there were that many scoring chances that the backup goalie for the Hurricanes did a good job on, that he would have been totally out of position for. He didn't think that he would have come even close to stopping it. So he basically got to play one night for his AHL career. It's all over with. That's all he wanted. He did his job, and that's it. But very interesting article that you'd ever have a broadcaster step in as a backup goalie for a team.
Did it say? Did it say where he had played before? I know you mentioned the UHL.
It didn't say the team. It didn't say the team, but he did play in the UHL, and that's all the article states. And I didn't do any research on that.
Okay, I'll have to look it up later. We'll have to see how he did, and to see if he played either college or juniors before that. Be interesting to see.
Yeah.
All right, cool story though. Kind of interesting.
Yep, very interesting.
All right, let's move on to the College Hockey Minute. I'm going to blow through it real quick here because it was kind of a quiet week last week in college hockey. First and foremost, Maine. I don't know if you knew, but Maine played last weekend in Belfast, Northern Ireland.
Yeah, I did not know that.
In the Friendship 4 tournament. They played at the home of the Belfast Giants, who play in the EIHL, the English, basically the top pro league in England. They went over there with Providence, RPI, and Clarkson. Those four schools played a tournament over there in the Friendship 4 tournament. I guess the tournament's been going on for a few years now. It's the first time Maine has gone. I actually have an old college friend of mine that actually went to the games. Actually bought a ticket they did a group package where you could buy a ticket on the bus, and you pay X number. I think it was $2,000 or $3,000, and you were able to go. Everything paid. Tickets to the game, hotels, you name it. Tours, all that stuff, and she had a real good time with it. So she's still posting pictures on Facebook about it. So it's kind of interesting. But she went to the games, and it was. But Maine that night, or the first night, they played Providence, and they lost that game 3-0. And then the second night, because they lost the first night, they played in the consolation game. RPI lost the first night, and Maine played RPI, beat them 4-2 in the consolation game. Clarkson, who's actually the number 5 team in the country, ended up beating Providence, who's actually the number 10 team in the country, in the championship of that tournament 4-2. So Clarkson won the Friendship 4 tournament this year. So just kind of, as we head to the holidays, it's something common in college hockey is all these little 4-team tournaments.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to host a tournament. Maine actually used to host what they used to call the Dexter Classic. The building that they play in, Harold Alfond Arena, is named after the founder of Dexter Shoe. Remember Dexter Shoes way back when? Yeah, well, Harold Alfond was the founder of that company, and the Dexter Shoe Company is actually a Maine-based company named after the town of Dexter, Maine. That's where it all started, and he built this shoe company empire. You couldn't go to any populated town in Maine and not drive by a Dexter Shoe store. I don't know how far south that brand came, but Dexter Shoes were a big thing back in the 80s and 90s until until Alphon sold the company off. I don't know who bought it, and then eventually the brand died. And now there's no such, pretty much, I don't think you can get Dexter shoes anymore. But anyway, and he was a primary financial supporter of the Maine hockey program back in the early days, and was a big benefactor for the team. And he pretty much spent the money to build the building they play in today. But anyway, when Maine was hosting a tournament at their building, they usually did it. I think it was around Christmas break sometime. It was called the Dexter Classic. They played that years and years and years, probably for a good 10 years anyway. And Maine won that tournament almost every year because they were in their heyday and winning. But that tournament eventually died out. But anyway, these tournaments go on during the holidays every year. So, right. And this was just one of them, the Friendship 4 tournament. So Maine got to play over there on the other side of the pond, play some college hockey over there in Belfast.
That's pretty cool.
Belfast, Northern Ireland. So that was their weekend. As for upsets, ranked teams, much quieter this week in college hockey. Friday night, there was only one upset. Union, who's unranked, beat number 3 North Dakota 4-1. That was at North Dakota, so pretty big upset. Yeah. But it was the only one Friday night. Saturday night, number 8 Minnesota State lost to number 16 Minnesota Duluth 3-1. That was kind of a mild upset. Number 9 Wisconsin lost 3-2 to Mercyhurst. That was at Wisconsin. Mercyhurst is unranked. That was a pretty good size upset there. And then a very mild upset, number 18 Colgate beat number 11 Western Michigan 5-1. Right. And then Tuesday night there was some more games, and there was actually an upset there worth noting. Unranked Connecticut beat number 12 Northeastern 4-1. That was a conference game, but it was still, because Northeastern is a ranked team, was worth noting that they got beat. In terms of big games coming up this weekend, now we're heading into a quieter time on the schedule. It really hasn't quieted down just yet, but we're starting to get to the point where we're going to start seeing light weeks. And right around Christmas, we're going to see a case where probably there'll only be 1 or 2 games going on the whole week throughout the whole country. So, but it's still a full slate of games this upcoming week. There just aren't a lot of big ones to note. On Friday night, you've got number 13 New Hampshire playing number 9 Providence. You've got number 1 Denver playing number 16 Minnesota Duluth, and they're actually playing a 2-game set there, Friday and Saturday night. Also Friday and Saturday night, number 10 Western Michigan is at North Dakota, who's number 6 this week. And number 2 St. Cloud State is playing a pair of games against number 20 Nebraska Omaha. So probably I would say our games of the week this week would be that Western Michigan, North Dakota series, I think, is probably going to be the best going on around the country. Mm-hmm. And then on Saturday night, in addition to the second half of the two-set games that I just mentioned, you also have number 9 Providence at New Hampshire, who's number 13. So the New Hampshire Providence is also a 2-game set, but they're home and home. They're not in the same building. Okay. Because New Hampshire and Providence are probably, I would guess, probably about a 3-hour drive from each other. Granted, you got the traffic of Boston to deal with. You got to get around Boston when you're going from one school to the next. But barring any traffic issues, it's probably no more than a 3-hour drive from Providence to New Hampshire, because UNH plays in the very southern part of the state. And, of course, Providence is, about an hour out of Boston, if that?
I haven't made that drive, but I'll take your word for it.
I haven't either. When I drive up north, I completely avoid Rhode Island because we kind of cut across Connecticut when we go up. So, but if I had to guess, it's about an hour, maybe 90 minutes from Providence to Boston. It's not that far. I think it's about 90 minutes, actually. All right. So let's look at the poll this week. At number 10 this week, we've got Western Michigan. Number 9 is Providence. Number 8, Minnesota State. Number 7, Minnesota. Number 6, North Dakota. Number 5 is Cornell. Number 4, Notre Dame. Number 3 is Clarkson. Number 2 is St. Cloud State. And number 1 this week with 39 out of a possible 45 first-place votes is Denver, back on top. And that's despite having a 7-3-2 record. I'm surprised that Denver still retains that number 1. But everybody at this point in Division I college hockey has lost at least 1 game. Cornell only has 1 loss. Everybody else has at least 2 losses. And Cornell is probably a case as they just haven't played anybody that strong yet. All right, so we're going to skip the pairwise for this week because just in the interest of time, we'll be talking more about the pairwise as the season winds down there in college hockey. So that leaves us with our picks of the week. And you want me to go first? You want to go first?
It doesn't. Mine is a longer one. I can get it out of the way. I am going to be paraphrasing an article.
All right, why don't I get mine out of the way then, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
I wanted to talk about Alex Ovechkin and what went on with him in Toronto this week. I don't know if you saw this, but
no, I did not.
The Capitals were in Toronto on Saturday night, and of course, this is Hockey Fights Cancer Month in the NHL, and a lot of the teams around the NHL are doing pretty much the same thing. They're bringing in usually a child who's a fan of their team, and they're bringing him in to give them kind of a dream night where they basically get to hang out with the team all night long. Obviously, they don't sit on the bench with them, but they're in the locker room before and after the game, and they're hanging out with the team during morning skate and all that stuff. Well, Alex Ovechkin had a buddy hanging out with him in Toronto on the road. So, a kid who lives in Toronto, cancer survivor. His name is Alex. And, of course, his favorite player is Alex Ovechkin. And Alex Ovechkin more than lived up to his promise to score a goal for 13-year-old cancer survivor Alex Louis on Saturday.
Starting at center, we got Nicholas Backstrom. Left wing, my buddy Ovi. Right wing, Tommy Wilson. Left D, Dmitry Orlov. Right D, Matt Niskanen. And your starting 10D, Braden Holtby.
Well, you can understand why there's so much enthusiasm for the Washington Capitals tonight. And there was Alex looking for Alex after one of his 2 goals. We apparently have a theme going here tonight. It's all Alex all the time. Ovechkin and Louis together.
With his biggest fan cheering him on, Ovechkin scored 3 in a 4-2 win against the Toronto Maple Leafs at Air Canada Centre. Ovechkin was in the right place to promise to score a goal. He had 22 goals in 25 games, including Stanley Cup playoff games in Toronto, and his 0.91 goals against his highest average at any NHL arena where he's played more than 10 games, according to the Elias Sports Bureau. But anyway, the way the story goes, of course, they had Alex in the Washington Capitals locker room before the game, and little Alex got to read the lineup. You know how the coach comes in the room? Okay, starting tonight, you've got,
Yeah.
So, well, Alex, the young Alex, got to read the starting lineup for the Capitals, and you've got to watch the video on that. I've got a link to it in the show notes. It's pretty cool. The whole team was into it.
Wow.
So Alex got to read off the starting lineup, and he goes out there, and Ovechkin said he was going to score a goal for Alex, and not only did he score 1, he scored 3. Little Alex couldn't have been happier about the situation.
Yeah, that is
very, very special night for a cancer survivor. So
that is. I think Alex Ovechkin's probably the I don't know, maybe Yager is, but he's got to be up there in terms of active players scoring hat tricks.
Yeah. Well, this was his 3rd of the year because he had those 2 right at the beginning of the year. But yeah. Alex Louis, he's a youth hockey player with the Niagara Falls Flyers. Last year was diagnosed with osteosarcoma, a cancer that lives inside the bone. Louis had part of his right leg amputated, but with his prosthetic has returned to play the sport he loves. So he's continued to play hockey despite losing part of his leg.
Wow,
when Sportsnet held its hometown hockey telecast in Niagara Falls on October 8th, host Ron McLean and Tara Sloan surprised Louis with a video message from Ovechkin, his favorite player. And then, and this is back several weeks ago. He said, "Hi Alex, it's your buddy Ovi." Ovechkin said in the video, "I hear you're cancer free. You're coming to the game in Toronto in November. I can't wait to meet you. I'll see you there soon." Of course, on Saturday, the Maple Leafs fittingly celebrating their hockey nights, Hockey Fights Cancer Night, and the Capitals brought him in to basically hang out. He arrived at the arena about 2 hours prior to opening faceoff. He got to hang out in the dressing room. He was on the bench for warm-ups. And basically got to have the dream night that we all wish we had when we were kids. So, but yeah, good night for him.
That is I'm telling you, that's a gift he'll never forget.
Yep,
never forget. Kudos to Alex Ovechkin, and of course, I guess he's cancer free, so we hope and pray that continues
for sure,
Alex Louis. But very good story. Let's see. Mine is a longer article, and I'm going to try to make it short, Wayne, because of the time constraints and everything.
Yep.
But in my recent article, in my recent magazine, I got the latest Hockey News magazine. I'm reading through it, looking through the articles and stuff, and I read this one here at the very end regarding Joe Sakic. And, you and I, we talked about the Matt Duchene trade. We talked about Matt Duchene being traded before this happened.
Yep.
In more than one podcast.
Yeah, we knew it was going to happen. It's just a matter
of when. We knew
when.
it was going to happen. We just didn't know when. But to look at it from the perspective of Joe Sakic, this article basically talks about this trade and what it meant to Joe Sakic and the Colorado Avalanche. It's written by Ken Campbell. It's the last word. It's called "Touch 'Em All, Joe Sakic." The Avalanche general manager needed a home run deal for Duchene to save his team and his job. He found exactly that. In his first 3 seasons in the NHL, Joe Sakic was a combined minus 102. In his second season, he was minus 40, which is an incredibly difficult feat to accomplish, particularly when you score 102 points. That same year, the Quebec Nordiques finished dead last, 33 points behind the second worst team, which established the high water mark for solitary futility. Even then, though, everyone thought Sakic was going to be an outstanding NHL player, that it was just a matter of time before he elevated the Nordiques/Avalanche to new heights, which is exactly what he did. When Sakic the legend was tabbed to take over as general manager of the Avalanche in 2014, we all thought there would be a learning curve. After all, he was only a few years removed from almost permanently maiming himself by sticking his hand into a working snowblower. After that happened, he was described by Avs president Jean Martineau as a bright, intelligent 39-year-old who made a mistake. As Colorado went from a team that surprised everyone by making the playoffs the season before Sakic's hiring to the one that foundered, then set about to alienating one of its best players, well, let's say people were starting to talk. If there was anyone who needed a job-saving Hail Mary of a transaction, it was Sakic. And then he went out and did it. For months and months, people screamed about the Matt Duchene situation and insisted the player be dealt. A need for instant gratification demanded that the Band-Aid he ripped off quickly. Let me read that again. A need for instant gratification demanded that the Band-Aid he ripped off quickly. And for months and months, Sakic waited and waited, showing the same kind of patience that made him one of the greatest offensive players of his generation. He told Duchene to be patient, that a deal would come sooner or later, and it would be completed. And only when Sakic got the deal he wanted, one that netted him one player, 3 very good prospects, and 3 draft picks, did he make the move. And all for that one player, a player whom he had been backed into a corner to deal in a trade market that was limited. Not only did that move save Sakic's job, but November 5th, 2017 may go down as the day the Avalanche officially turned their fortunes around. Like the 1987 trade of Dale Hunter that landed the pick they used to select Sakic, the trade has the potential to be an enormous game changer for the Avs' long-term future. All of a sudden, things are becoming more crystallized in Denver. And if the subtraction of Duchene somehow facilitates a drop in the standings, that gives the Avs a better chance at top 2018 draft prospect Rasmus Dahlin, all the better. How does a future defense core, perhaps anchored by Eric Johnson, Dahlin, Cale Makar, and the newly acquired Samuel Girard sound? Not a bad place to start. And let's assume Shane Bowers, the Boston University center, who is a couple of years away, can make a contribution. A center ice trio of Nathan McKinnon, Tyson Jost, and Bowers looks pretty promising. And now, with 2 picks in each of the first 2 rounds of the 2018 draft, Sakic is in a position to make deals to move up in the draft. That, ladies and gentlemen, is some very good work. Until now, Sakic's record as a GM has been rather undistinguished, unless you consider getting a 7th-round pick in exchange for Freddie Hamilton, a deal of significance. There was a lot of those. He obviously didn't get nearly enough for Ryan O'Reilly and very nearly lost him to an offer sheet, although Sakic managed to steal Sven Andrighetto away from the Montreal Canadiens for Andreas Martinson. But for the most part, there were far too many Cody Corbett for Joe Canada deals, ones that are akin to arranging deck chairs on the Titanic.
Yeah.
Sakic desperately needed to hit a home run on this trade for his own job security and for the future of the Avalanche, and he put it into the parking lot. So perhaps just as it was with the player, Sakic simply needed some time to hit his stride and to start carrying this franchise. To be sure, Sakic will not be seen as a pushover in trade talks with other GMs. Anyone who can get 7 assets for a player who has never scored more than 30 goals, has played just 8 playoff games, and never scored in any of them, and never finished in the top 3 in scoring for any major award is not to be trifled with. Sakic, the GM, has indeed arrived in a big way, more than 3 years after taking over the hockey department in Denver. The best thing about all this is that there is finally some hope in Colorado. Professional sports teams, even more than wins or losses, are in the business of selling hope. There was not a lot of that with Sakic at the helm for the better part of 3 years, but that all of that has changed now. So a good article about Joe Sakic, and I guess some stuff that I didn't know about what he might be trying to do with the trades and picks that he's got. But It is a little bit early, too.
Yeah,
Colorado does.
We talked about it and I said in podcast past that what a deal this was for Colorado. I mean, yeah, they're in the near term they're losing a good player in Matt Duchene, but the stuff he got in return was eye-popping for me anyway.
Absolutely, and especially when you consider what he said there at the end. He's only played 8 playoff games, never scored in any of them, never scored more than 30 goals in a year. This is not a... Matt Duchene, probably their best player, wasn't, an elite goal scorer, the likes of a Vladimir Tarasenko.
And he's done nothing since he left. He literally had 0 goals, 0 assists since leaving Colorado.
All around, it's worked well for Joe Sakic to this point, so we'll see what happens. But it was a very interesting article.
Yep, very interesting. Okay, well, we've been yammering on here for 2+ hours, so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up this week. We got a lot to talk about, and I think we got through it all. And
we did.
We're not going to, go on too much further. Our next scheduled podcast is just a week away, over on November. No, we're into December now. December what? December 7th would be the next one?
That is the next one. Next Thursday night.
Yeah. So, yeah, December 7th will be the next one. So stay tuned. And we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. So until next week, we will catch you then. Have a good night, Steve.
Wayne.
Yeah, you too.